king of the world! Woo! Woo! Have you ever been to Wisconsin?
What?
I grew up there in Chippewa. There, we had some of the coldest winters around there, and I remember going to Lake Wissota with my dad there, and we went ice fishing. You know, that's like where you
I
kind
know
of
what ice fishing is.
Jesus, all right, you just seemed like kind of an indoor boy there. Hey, do you want to go to a real party?
I'm flying. Jack, I'm flying. Jack. I'll never let go. I promise. I'll never let go.
That was really good. It reminds me of something that I can't... Lord of the Rings. Star Trek, the motion picture. Star Trek 2. No, wait, I remember now. It's Star Trek 4, but only the whale montage, the space whale montage. A Cruel Angel's Thesis. That's what it is. I didn't know you watched that show. Oingo boingo.
Hello from our quarantined bedroom to your quarantined bedroom. Welcome to another episode of Unprotected Texts. I'm Matt.
And I'm Jacob.
And tonight we will be talking about the wildly unbelievable but really fantastic memoir, Sounds Like Titanic by Jessica Chiquetto-Hindman. So you read this more recently than I have.
Finished this
I reviewed it.
Yes.
I perused it again because I read it the first time about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and then you just read it and just finished it a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and having just finished it too, I will say this just right off the bat, and I apologize. I didn't love this book.
Okay.
Right off the bat, that's my initial review.
So you didn't capital L love it, you small lowercase l love it?
I like it. I would invite it to parties with friends, but I would not be like, hey, just want to hang out, like just the two of us. Even if I would need a buffer friend.
You're hitting me where I live.
Which is the same place as me.
We live together in case you didn't pick up on that.
Yes. But I did like a lot of it, and I can definitely see why you liked it, because,
right.
And I think you should maybe go into a little bit of your background and how it definitely ties very much into the story contained within Sounds Like Titanic.
Okay, I can do that, and I can also give a overview of what the whole premise is, and we're just going to do this once.
Yes.
Yes. It's the story of this young woman as she comes of age in Appalachia, West Virginia, and Virginia in the 90s, and then she starts taking violin lessons at a young age. And as she's growing up, she eventually applies to colleges. She gets into Columbia University in New York City, and she moves there and is navigating her life there, trying to make a living for herself, figuring out what she wants to study. Initially, she thinks she wants to do music, and she switches that to Middle Eastern studies. And at one point, she's studying abroad in Egypt, and literally 9/11 happens, like 2 weeks, literally 2 weeks after she is in Egypt, and trying to find her footing there, and how she's going to fit into this new scary reality and everything that leads up into and during the Iraq War as she's still living in New York. And also while she's in Columbia, and for a little while afterward, I think she was with the ensemble for 6 years.
That's right.
But as she's in Columbia, she finds work as a violinist for this touring ensemble, and she just calls it the Composers Ensemble. The composer is never explicitly named, but those of you that are more curious can probably quite easily figure it out.
Yeah.
But so the whole thing with this ensemble is she's never actually performing or playing her violin. Instead, she goes out with these like 2 or 3 other musicians to different malls and fairs and outdoor type things, hawking CDs of this composer's music. And instead of actually performing at these venues where they're selling the CDs, she's standing in front of a mic with her violin. The mic is dead.
Dead mic.
And instead, what's getting piped through the speakers is just a back recording of somebody else playing it. So she's basically fake fiddling, and it's about how it's kind of pulling a fast one on the audiences, and this just incredible facade that the composer constructs for his ensemble, and how even though she's not a real violinist, not in like the New York Phil sense, not in like a actual performer sense, she's able to tour all across America, including the God Bless America tour of 2004, which takes up a good chunk of the book.
Besides all of that, there are drugs, anxiety,
body issues,
class between coasts,
the irony of having an easier time getting a job being a fake violinist than being a real war correspondent in the Middle East. Because, again, she went to school. Her undergrad degree from Columbia is in Middle Eastern Studies, and yet she could not find a single job anywhere in the Middle East about reporting and corresponding back to America for journalism, for the breaking situations in the Middle East. Nobody cared. Nobody wanted to know the nuances of what was happening.
Which is very true. And she also talks about it's the 90s.
Right.
Which is one of my I do really like that phrase. It's a phrase she brings back up as she was
in italics.
In italics. It is, you're right, it's in italics.
It's sort of like that arch tone that Jacob just so wonderfully demonstrated.
It's the 90s.
Yeah, that's
it's the 90s. Judge angles. Triangles. Ribbons all everywhere.
Nickelodeon's all that.
Nickelodeon splatters.
Was Fresh Prince of Bel-Air 90s?
If it's not, then my brain is broken forever. He's a Scientologist.
Is he? Will Smith?
There's rumors that he is. It's not confirmed.
They got him?
They got him. Maybe.
Is that why he and Jaden broke up? They did, didn't they?
Wait, what?
Yeah, they're like going through a divorce.
I didn't know this.
What was your hardest time in our marriage?
But as someone who also connects a lot with the 90s, because we grew up in the 90s, just post-Berlin Wall fell, knocked those commies down.
I actually do sort of remember Princess Diana dying because...
Really?
And I remember all the adults were sitting on the sofa, watching TV, and it was like at night, because it was even later in Britain and France where it had happened, and they were like glued to the TV, and it was like breaking news, and I remember, I was like 5 years old.
Weird.
Yeah.
All I remember from being 5 was being stung by wasps.
And you liked it, didn't you?
I loved every second of it. Social insects! But talking about the 90s, I relate to a lot of that, and I like her phrase of "it's the 90s" because it does kind of portray. I think it points out the nostalgia for the 90s that people our age have that is problematic and kind of feeds into a lot of
simplistic. Yeah.
Simplistic. That's what it is. It's very like you were saying this. We won. Communism gone.
Yeah.
Nazis
History's
gone.
over.
Terrorism done.
We just ride the unicorn of liberalism into the great beyond.
Cha! Yata! Like any good memoir, there are those things that are you can relate to regardless. Like, I wasn't a music major like Matt. I was in the high school marching band, and I was awful at every single instrument I played, just straight garbage, every single one.
Which one was your favorite, though?
My favorite was
the
the French horn, but I was legitimately awful at it because you really do need like an ear, and I don't have those.
You get to put your hand.
You get to put your hand
into
which, let's be honest. When you're young, everything you do, at least if you have certain parents, and we can certainly, I think, relate to this, is if you have certain parents and you do anything creative, they're like, you're a genius. Like, my mom, she tells the story of how, like, I could recognize bird calls when I was 4, and I'm pretty sure I was just imitating her, you know? Like, seriously. Like, she'd be like, that's a blue jay, and I was like, blue jay. And, you know, and I don't know if I actually made any connections there, but she'd be like, he knew all the planets. He knew all the bird calls. He's destined for greatness. He'll be the first bird astronomer.
This is somewhat sort of related to the phenomenon that I do not have any patience for in the bookstore.
Yes.
Which is parents coming up to the info desk or grandparents and telling me all about how special little Susie is.
Yeah.
And how she needs a book about dinosaurs that are also ballerinas.
Yeah.
And I have got some hot tea for you right here. If your kid was that special and precocious and wanted books that bad, you would not have to be there. They would be there themselves.
That's true. And we've met those kids.
Yeah.
There are some wonderful kids who come into the bookstore who know what they want. They're smart. They're articulate. They just come right up and go, I want books about velociraptors with feathers.
Keep still, because you think that maybe his visual acuity is based on movement, like T-Rex, and he'll lose you if you don't move. But no, not
booksellers.
You stare at him, and he just stares right back. And that's when the attack comes, not from the front, but from the side. From the other two
booksellers.
You didn't even know were there.
Parents want kids, and their own kids especially, I guess, to do well, but it's just like a long con.
Kind of, yeah, it really is.
It's a confidence game.
Yeah.
That, you know, if you play into it too much can be a real downer, because, I mean, life is just full of disappointment.
It really is, though. Take a look at the world.
Right. This week. And then next week, exponentialized to the power of 3.
Yep. That's what I connected to, a lot of it. I will say, I think also a thing that helps and hurts the book is it's written in the second person.
Mostly, yeah. Yeah, for the most part, I'd say like 75% of it is second person.
Yeah.
And she does talk, like, right from the jump about why she decided to use that literary device of using the secondary person when actually she's talking about herself.
Yes. So, like, if in an instance it would be like, you were told that you were great at bird calls when you were 4, if it was me writing a book, you know? Like, it's my story. In case you're not familiar with the second person, there's your second person. It's not literally a second person reading you the book, although I did have that when I was reading this. But that's not what they did. Oh, yeah.
Who was reading it?
Oh, the little goblin man I keep up here in the attic. His name is
Adolf Eichmann.
Adolf Eichmann.
I ruined it.
I think it helps the book give it kind of like this universal sense. Even
you don't think it's just an instance of linguistic trickery to, like, where she, like, tries to, like, rope you in on it by, like, making everything about you? Because I think some people might think that she thinks that she realizes that everyone is self-centered and wants to make everything about themselves. So if you make this book in the second person, people are going to be like, oh, it's about me.
It's about me. Oh my God, is that me? Did I do that?
I wrote a book.
I think about that on every book I've ever picked up. I pick it up and go, oh my God, did I write this? How did this get here? I think it is part of that.
Simon & Schuster, that's how that got there.
Like you're saying, I think it does kind of play into people's, like, egos, and it is kind of a trick. But I also think it is, like, legitimately a good way of kind of expressing the attitudes of a decade.
Also, it's a way for her as the author and as just a person to sort of take a step back from everything that was happening to her, because she went through a lot. I mean, there's a lot that she talks about, and there's a lot that she goes through, including a debilitating anxiety disorder and panic attacks.
And drug abuse.
And some drug abuse. and she needs psychiatric help at some point, like
Yeah.
especially towards the end she gets into that a little bit. So it's a way for her to sort of like take a step back and make this not so much about herself, and that way she's able to divulge more and be more honest.
Yeah.
Which I think for the most part she achieves very well, and it's not contrived or conceited or awkward, I thought.
No, I think the problem only comes in for me was when she drops the second person, which I mean, look, it's clearly intentional, but when she drops it, it took me a second to figure out why is she dropping the second person, and I have some theories, but I want to hear yours as to why she drops it in certain moments.
I didn't really think about it that hard. I think I only noticed that when she was talking about the God Bless America tour as they're like going city to city, and I think it was like 55 cities. Or a ridiculous amount, but as they're like going in this basically an RV across the country, and just day in and day out, like the same concerts, the same schmaltz, the same, Cracker Barrel, Golden Corral, garbage food. You're
I'm nostalgic for crap that I can't eat anymore.
I went to Cracker Barrel once.
Yeah.
I guess I would do it again, but that's only because it's been so long.
I thought Cracker Barrel was the clothing store for the longest time. I legitimately did not know it was a restaurant.
I think they
for
also sell
years.
clothes.
Really?
Yeah. At least the one I went to.
Wait.
I'm pretty sure they sold like shirts and like, I don't know, paraphernalia related to the state that we happen to be in.
Okay, but it wasn't like some guy in the restaurant being like, "You want to buy a T-shirt?
No,
It's got your face on it."
No, the restaurant was in like it was like the other half of the building.
Okay, fair enough. Jesus. Oh my god. This is where I feel bad mouthing this book. Again, I liked it, but the parts that did work for me is the fact that it's trying to string everything together, and it doesn't always connect for me. A lot of the moments
Strands are dropped.
Strands are dropped and not always tied to each other. Some are, and some are tied very well, and some are just square knots that are very, loose. That being said, it is all her life, so you could argue that that's the thread connecting everything, because it all happened to her.
Right.
And it's kind of on me that her life didn't fit in a neat 3-act structure. Like why? It's weird of me to be like, hey, why isn't your life like a perfect movie for me to watch? And why didn't events in your life unfold in like a narrative a manner? So that I do feel bad about saying, but.
Well,
Still didn't work for me.
To back you up on that, I mean, she talks about how I think sophomore year in Columbia, for all of like a page and a half, she talks about how she started using cocaine to like power through her 2 jobs plus all of her classes, and like didn't she sell her eggs?
Yeah, she sold her eggs. Yeah. Which sounds
or froze them or something like that. But just to like get through all of that and try and stay afloat in the city while also being a student. And then she just touches on that for all of like a page and a half, and then she calls Yevgeny, her friend.
Yes.
And he like sits with her, and she just quits cold turkey, and that's it. Whereas, you could have made that a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
You could have made that a whole nother chapter to talk about all the societal issues in conjunction with everything else.
Yeah.
Like body issues, anxiety, that sort of thing.
Faking it till you make it, which is also could
the
be
economics of college.
Yes, exactly. Which all come up again, and yeah, it could have just been tighter. Could have cinched those.
Or just make the book longer.
I would have loved a longer book.
Yeah.
Like we said in our Ducks Newburyport review. Actually, I think it'll be over here. Can't remember which side they put those on. Anyway.
Yeah, it is like right over here.
It's right over there. Woo. Is that women don't get to write long books, and when you're writing,
unless you're Donna Tartt.
Unless you're Donna Tartt, or I guess Lucy Ellman. But I do feel like when again, this is all make believe. This is not confirmed by anyone or anything. When she brought this book to Norton, she was like, I would like to tell my story. I was in this crazy composer deal. I was a fake violinist. I did drugs to make it through college. I worked hard. Here's my journalistic background. Here's all my degrees that I worked really hard for. I want to write this book about this crazy composer violinist. It's going to be a little bit scandal, a little bit thing. And they're like, cool. No. because you're no one and no one cares about your life.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's like, okay, well, I guess I'll just go back home to Appalachia. And they're like, hold up! Get back in here. Get back in here. You can write your book, but
She said the A word.
She said the A word. They were like, cha-ching, awooga, like cartoon,
Right.
like the.
Are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs?
Are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs? Are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs? After thou feeling it now, Mr. Krabs.
It's her life, and I'm glad she wrote this book. Your life has some weird parallels.
Yeah, in a way, I would say, especially when she talks about how she first became enamored of the violin. It very closely mirrors how I became enamored of the organ and the piano. So when she's about 4 years old, the author talks about seeing this animated movie called Sarah and the Squirrel. Now I have to look it up.
A new film by Yoram Gross tells the true story of a child who found more friends amongst the creatures of the forest than in the human race.
She talks about seeing this animated movie called Sarah and the Squirrel, and part of the soundtrack for one of the scenes is just like a snippet of Vivaldi's Winter, the violin concerto, and she is just so taken by this music, the sound of it, and what it can mean, both artistically but broader in life, and it sort of presents a window to her, a way out, if you will, out of the sort of depression and the lower standards of living and everything going on in Appalachia. And she sees it as something completely different and foreign, but exciting and new.
Yeah.
I felt the same way when I was about 8. I saw this movie. It is a sequel to Beauty and the Beast. I swear it's real. It went straight to VHS. It's called Beauty and the Beast, The Enchanted Christmas. It is basically the same plot points of the first Beauty and the Beast, except it takes place during Christmas.
I have so many more questions about this movie, but I'm going to table them for a separate discussion.
So there's like a few added characters on the side, and one of them, the main antagonist, is a sentient pipe organ named Forte. And seriously, yes, for real. His name's Forte.
Can you do an impression of Forte?
I'm bolted to the wall!
I think I might. I'll just pick myself up and... Oh, what's this? Good heavens, look! I'm bolted to the wall!
I was raised religiously. However, the church that I was raised in, a evangelical modern praise band church, did not even have an organ, so I never knew what the sound of a pipe organ was. So when I first heard some of the sounds and the music from a pipe organ that were just like tangential to this character, I was just immediately just enraptured by it, and begged and pleaded my mom for about a year for like piano lessons or any sort of music lessons. And I'm not from a musical family, so she thought I was lying, as kids do. Or it was or like, you know,
it's a phase.
They ask for things and then they don't mean it, and then before you know it, you've sunk $200 on lessons that don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But
See, my parents.
You know, it ended up, you know, I did eventually start taking piano when I was 9, almost 10. But the thing is, and she recognizes this, and she specifically mentions, unless you start taking music lessons when you're like 2 or 3, you have missed the boat. It's over. You're done. Before you even started, you're done. So you really do have to start very young. And I mean, I did take to it, to my parents' delight and surprise, because, again, not a musical family. And I did well, and all the way through grade school, middle school, high school, and even majored in piano and organ in undergrad, and then went to grad school. I went to grad school.
Seriously.
Got a master's in organ performance because I realized no one is going to pay me to play piano. As much as I like the piano, no one is going to pay me to play.
You could always do one of those shitty dueling piano bars where everyone just
I could,
flings quarters at you and tells you
but
to play Piano Man?
Ravel doesn't do well like the dueling piano bars.
Do you know Piano Man? Hey, do Piano Man!
Triggered.
Sorry.
There's like blood trickling out of my ear over on this
It's
side.
really disgusting.
Similarly, she is taking lessons and she works very hard. And that's sort of like with you and with the it's the 90s sort of motif that comes up throughout the whole book. She talks about how people growing up in her life would say, you have a real gift. Like with that sort of inflection. And they would just like place this mantle of aesthetic genius and giftedness upon her that she knew deep down she did not really have. So it's like the awkwardness of living with that and knowing that yes, you're very studious and you're a hard worker and you practice a lot and you apply yourself and you believe the propagation that if you just apply yourself in America, you can get anywhere. Sure. But at the same time, you just know that you're not one of those savants. You're not some little 5-year-old whipping out Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto. You're not able to do that. And she did go to Columbia initially, thinking she would major in music, but she gave that up pretty quickly. Similar to her, I just recognized that I have a certain sort of aptitude, and I apply myself and expect a lot of myself and have standards, but I'm no genius.
And that's fair, but that's
like
a good realization.
I think, which is why I so much related and really came to really like her writing and her voice and her story, is because I think it takes a lot of strength and courage if you're somebody who grew up in music or even just really liked music, to sort of have to at some point or another realize that if you're going to continue in music, it's not going to look the way that you dreamed or wanted it to. Or number two, maybe you're just not quite cut out for it entirely. Like that is very much a real possibility. And to accept that with even just a shred of humility is, I think, laudable and admirable.
Absolutely. And I would extend that to any art discipline. Theater, sculpting, painting, you name it. Writing, film editing, baking. Sometimes you're just not that good at it. Sometimes you just delete everything and you have to reshoot it.
I wasn't going to bring that up.
I'm going to bring it up because I will never cease my penance walk.
So you're Sisypheus in this situation.
Except
in this situation.
I'm
he presses his fists against the post and still insists he sees the ghosts.
Anyway, no, except for Sisyphus did something good. I was just dumb. Anyway, I think that plays into like having this drive to succeed and being told you're going to succeed no matter what. It leads to two, arguably, I'm just going to simplify and say two types of people. One type of person is like Jessica here, who comes to realize that she's not maybe cut out for it, but she has plenty of other talents and plenty of other routes to become a well-rounded person, and she works on that, and it's great. And in that way, it's a triumphant story. Or you take the second route, which I think is also similar to what maybe happened to the composer, and this is just based on my obsession with cult leaders, because it is the 2000s and we're the 2010s, and we love cults now again. So yay, and I can't wait for more Corona cults to come out of this, because it is a ripe time for cults. A lot like cult leaders like Jim Jones was also told from a young age, you will be great, you're destined for greatness. And when you're mediocre, and you're told you're destined for greatness, sometimes it turns you to a crazy cuckoo person who has to fake it until they make it. And so I think that's what the composer did. I think at some point he was told, you're very good at what you do, or maybe he's just a con artist. I don't know.
I think he's very shrewd.
Yeah.
I think he understands the power of music to fulfill people's desires.
I'm going to compare him a lot to Jim Jones in this next bit. Because Jim Jones, which by the way, you should read Road to Jonestown. Such a good book. Such a good book. Where Jim Jones starts off and is doing things that are helping people, much like the composer, because this music is helping people.
Sure, it's like okay, so the title sounds like Titanic, incidentally enough, is, first of all, a great title. Second of all, the title comes from all of the music that the composer is having the ensemble that he sends out across the country, and eventually across the country in this long tour that he goes on with them. All the music sounds uncannily similar to the soundtrack to Titanic.
Yes.
From the movie.
Yeah.
Like just a few shades away from copyright infringement, pretty much. Just so imagine lots of penny whistle, warm chords, simple harmonies, whooshing, and like they even she talks about being on stage, and often there would be this video that would play behind them on the stage with like an eagle soaring over a canyon or a river or something like that, and people would like lose it. They would just like start sobbing.
Yeah, and they had real connections with it, and much like Jim Jones, he would go out to get to know people. The composer would. He would. She recounts many times. So the composer sits and listens to people talk
for hours.
For hours.
He meets all of them individually at the concerts.
And this part is where it gets where this blurred line of is he a con man? Is he like just a cynical asshole taking advantage of people, or does he really kind of actually care, and this is in his mind how he's giving back? He also takes advantage of his crew, though.
Yeah, he treats them. He doesn't know Jessica's name like half the time. He calls her Melissa.
Yes.
He almost killed Yevgeny on a separate tour because he made Yevgeny sleep in the trailer attachment, which did not have heating, and they were like driving at night in Montana in winter, so he almost froze to death.
He literally almost died. And he tells her this, and then later in the book she's like, the composer almost killed me too.
That's what makes it so interesting. The root of her anxieties and her breakdown is both on a macro stage and also on a micro stage, because as she's performing in these shows and on these stages for people all across the country, and she's fake fiddling, she realizes that they can't tell, or they just refuse to tell because they're living in denial.
Yeah.
They can't tell what's real playing and what isn't.
Yeah.
Similarly, across the whole country, people can't come to grips with the reality of situations in the Middle East and the fabrication of WMDs in Iraq, and just like making up out of almost nothing, invading a country.
Yeah.
About halfway through, we get to a section where I really think that she sort of lays out the thesis for what she's talking about and how this relates to her life specifically. And it's while she's finishing up her time in Colombia. March 2003. The Iraq War, you promise yourself, you will tell your grandchildren someday, was like a poisonous snake slithering across the length of a football field. Everyone could see it coming from a long distance. We could have walked away from it. We could have shot it with a round of snake shot. We could have clubbed it over the head with a hoe. Instead, it slithered right up. It took a while, but it got there. And then it struck, lightning fast. And the venom spread, slowly, agonizingly, for more than a decade. And if your grandchildren ask you, what were Americans doing while the snake was slithering toward them? You have an answer. For you saw them, thousands of Americans, in New York and Connecticut and Arkansas and Florida and Virginia and Vermont. Rich and poor, Democrat and Republican, black and white, women and men. You saw them all right, watched them for hours, and they were all doing the same thing, listening to music. They craved it, were charmed by it, hypnotized, soothed. Couldn't get enough of it, bought 12 CDs at a time, millions of albums. Music that sounded just like a movie about an entire society, rich on the top deck, poor on the bottom deck, headed for disaster.
Yeah.
The composer, as a character, is someone that is just so baffling.
Baffling.
It's really strange.
In so many ways,
Yeah.
not just how he treats his employees, but also just his quirks. Like they're playing Beethoven's Fifth Symphony on the in the CD in the RV as they're driving, and he like asks them what music this is.
Yeah.
Even though it's like one of the most recognizable pieces of all time. He doesn't understand like basic political realities, like who's running for president in 2004. He doesn't understand how to orchestrate. He at one point forces Jessica and somebody else in the ensemble to basically do his work for him.
Yeah. Transpose pieces, right?
Orchestrate them
Okay.
like take chords that were written for the piano and then divvy them up among different instruments.
Oh.
He, before each concert, he runs laps around the venue in his concert dress clothes.
Yes.
Baffling.
And then smiles like a maniac.
Yeah, and smiles like a maniac, and then makes you smile like a maniac too, being like, you need to smile. It's that classic, now it's kind of classic, smile more. People like it if you smile more. And he's just going, he's nuts. He sounds like he should be a character in like a Tiger King style documentary. I want to make Match watch
modern.
Tiger King.
Staying modern.
Oh God, Tiger King!
Although, despite all the misgivings and all the faults and shortcomings of the composer and what being in his ensemble did to the author, I think at the end of the book, at the very end, when she goes on the very last gig with the composer to a mall in Jersey, again for the last time to pretend playing the violin while they're selling CDs, and it's just her and the composer in the car, and she says that he sort of divulges his life story basically to her and a lot of his background and how he got to where he is, basically this musical con man. And she writes all this down and it's in the book, but she doesn't say exactly what the contents of that conversation is. It's not like dissing. It's not like dishing sordid detail.
This goes back to my earlier thing about what her real moral choices were when writing this book versus what makes a good story.
Okay.
In the version of this where the narrative is super awesome and great, you get that story out of the composer, you drag it out of him, you lay out all the details, and you tie it back to your own story. She didn't do that, and I want to ask you now, because now I'm a little suspicious. Legal reasons or legitimate moral concern for the composer?
Moral concern for him? You mean like that
Like
people
if
online would like drag him?
Yeah.
I don't think either of those.
Ooh.
I don't think so. I mean, she's said in a couple of interviews that I've seen. Hi, Jessica. She's said that this was never meant to be an expose.
Yeah.
She didn't. It's not supposed to be about him. I mean, yes, a lot of her problems came about from being in this ensemble, but I really do think that she takes responsibility for herself first.
That's very true.
I don't think it was ever like she was afraid of legal repercussions.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Good.
And I also she must have known that like people would figure it out. It's not as simple or as suspicious or cheap as like both side isms. I think that it's because it's not one way of life conflicting against another way of life as so much of politics can be. It's a very personal and humane sort of thing when they're sitting in this car together.
Yeah.
And I think she extends a lot of grace and understanding, even if it is sort of begrudgingly, because again, she went through a lot.
Yeah. You almost want to see her. Again, in like a Hollywood 3-act movie, it would be like, and I'm never coming back because I'm better than you.
The storm out.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And then he'd be like, no, darling, please wait. No, I need you, babe.
Hi, hello. Do you remember me? No, I'm sorry. I was in here yesterday. You wouldn't wait on me? Oh, you work on commission, right? Yes. Big mistake. Big. Huge.
I think she's funny.
I think she can be funny. Absolutely.
Okay.
Funnier than me.
Mm-hmm.
Are you ranking? I would say she's funnier than me, but not as funny as you. And I mean that.
Seriously?
I really
Oh,
mean
come
that.
on.
I really do. Come at me.
I think she's pretty funny, but in like a knowing and in an ironic sort of way, because it's sort of, she uses that to comment about and highlights some of the absurdities of situations.
Yeah.
Like the astronomical costs of college.
Yeah.
And young adults trying to make their way and pay for themselves and support themselves, especially if they come from a different geographical place.
Yeah.
Because she talks about the phenomenon of being considered upper middle class in Appalachia and then moving to New York, where everyone around her was rich all the time.
Yeah.
And having to deal with the money. That's another one of her motifs.
That's a good mantra too.
The money, capital M money, and having to how nobody talks about the money, but it is like an all-consuming, omnipresent sort of concern of people.
The idea that we're trusting 18-year-olds to be like, you can't drink, but please give us $160,000 to set up the rest of your
Criminal.
life.
And it's just absurdity to expect an 18-year-old to walk into college and know what they're going to do for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
They're going to pick one thing and do that one thing.
Yeah. If it was me, it would just be probably just jerking off and bird watching, which unfortunately, and reading Vonnegut. But I liked it, Matt.
Yeah, I would recommend it. When I first read it about a year ago, I really just tore through it. I really sort of let myself be taken by it.
Let himself be taken.
Well, that's what.
Just take me, go.
I really enjoyed spending time with her and with her writing, and I guess I didn't really so much notice the more or less lack of a more cohesive structure. I guess I was just fine with it because everything that was happening and her story with being in the composers ensemble was so wild and almost unbelievable, and everything that she gets up to and put through, that I just wanted to find out more and like hear more of her observations and more of her take on society and the culture in America.
Absolutely.
Since then, I sort of cooled off a little bit from that, but I still do think that it's a worthwhile book and a good read for, I would say, anybody, even whether you're a professional musician or an amateur or just somebody that likes listening to classical music every now and then, even though the music that he writes is not classical.
Decidedly not classical.
Millennials in particular will recognize a kindred voice.
Absolutely. If you were born from like 85 to 95, you'll be like, even later probably, you'll be like, I get this. It's totally true.
This isn't so much necessarily a millennial phenomenon, but she also talks about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And just the feeling of never really never feeling like you've earned it, whatever it is that you've made it to in your life. And I mean, when she first was trying out for the composers ensemble and she thought that this was like an actual paying gig, and she was, a nervous wreck and thinking that she somehow had bumbled her way into a professional violinist gig, when in fact it was just a fake violinist gig. But there are still instances of feeling like you're never going to be good enough, and some of that is sort of tied back to that that ethic of how people from our generation are constantly working, and we even work on our ability to do work.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
the fact that everyone we know has at least 2 jobs and still feels like they don't belong is a real problem that I think is probably pretty unique to our generation. I have nightmares. My worst mistake I've made at my current bakery is we were making cream puffs. And how you bake cream puffs is you turn the oven on really hot and you put this is just one way. You put the cream puffs in, then you turn the oven off and you let that residual heat bake the cream puffs. Guess what step I forgot?
Turning the oven off.
Step 1 of 2 or 2 of 2. I just forgot. And I have just like nightmares of cream puffs going, "You did this to us. You killed us." Just like marching around. And then I become the cream.
Did you throw them out yourself, or did Jen tell you, look away and I'll take care of this?
No, she was like loading a shotgun. I didn't really understand.
Now go stand right over there. I think it's an entertaining read.
Yeah.
So definitely worth your time. And especially because right now so many indie bookstores are needing help in boosting their businesses, because obviously they're taking an economic hit as is everybody. So if you're in a position to help out, give your hard-earned cash to some indie booksellers and let them know what it is that you want to read. They're happy to order anything for you, because guess what? Amazon is not prioritizing book sales. When did they ever? So,
and they started as a bookstore.
Right. But again, highly recommend it. Go see for yourself why it's a great book. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to look for the unedited, uncut, Unprotected Texts podcasts, which will be forthcoming. Do you have an ETA on that?
Oh, God. Let's just say next week.
Okay. Sure, next week. And be sure to subscribe to our channel and comment below with any sort of thoughts or feelings you may have about either of us or the book.
Go cut deep. I want to know every problem you have with our faces.
Delete it fat. Something like that.
Take it. I'll take it. Any of it.
Yeah. And remember, if you're going to run from yourself,
at least bring a book.